Oh my goodness, hello. I'm glad that we all are glad that you all are here tonight. You're in for a treat. Tonight, we welcome to the Findlay campus Anil Singh-Molares, our 2018 Woodrow Wilson Visiting Fellow. Anil arrived from the state of Washington yesterday afternoon. He landed in Detroit. His plane was 45 minutes early. That doesn't happen very often. Last night, he met with the 2018 Woodrow Wilson Visiting Fellow Ambassadors. These are students from all the colleges selected each year to introduce our visiting fellow to the university and to the life of the campus. Anil had a full schedule today, visiting with President Fell this morning, talking with students in the College of Business this morning, enjoying lunch in the College of Business Student Life Center with 6 or 7 of the ambassadors, meeting with UF's Director of Civic Engagement, attending a dinner in his honor, and accepting an invitation to speak with you all tonight. It has, in fact, been a very busy day, but in fact, he is eager to share this time with you. Even after a long day, our speaker seems to be energized with an opportunity to share his story. And his story is grounded in philosophy, English literature, theology, and religion. His story is grounded in the liberal arts. His story stresses the importance, the possibilities for the future when a firm liberal arts foundation is securely in place. After serving as leader in the world of business for a number of years and receiving much recognition and awards for his efforts, Anil broadened his interest and activities to include the world of teaching, public speaking, lecturing, writing, life mentoring, spiritual guidance, and development. In what our guest describes as a powerful sign of universal alignment, he now is in a position to bring together his multiple skills and energies to lead Spiritual Directors International. It's a nonprofit based in the state of Washington. The organization, close to it celebrating its 30th year, focuses on communicating the values of spiritual direction, nurturing the spiritual direction community, and advancing spiritual companionship through collaboration. He is a well-regarded public speaker and a Woodrow Wilson Visiting Fellow, having visited, lectured, and taught at more than 24 universities throughout the U.S. And now the list includes Oiler Nation. Anil believes that life is imminent with possibilities, both seen and unseen, and is committed to working with individuals to help them rediscover their own innate wisdom. Whether serving as a senior director of a multinational technology company, starting and/or running 3 nonprofits, organizing major international conferences, providing help to promising inventors to value and sell their products, co-founding a management consulting and international services firm, or advising individuals and groups how to implement meaningful and lasting changes. Anil knows how to transform big ideas into practical realities. A social entrepreneur and thought leader, Anil is now ordained as a Zen monk on Friday. Congratulations. Anil looks to combine the best practices from the world of business with a commitment to practical, compassionate action. Please welcome Anil Singh-Molares.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And thank you all for being here. It's really a pleasure This is my first time in Ohio, and this university is already seared into my memory, both the beauty of the campus, the enthusiasm of all of you students, the equestrian program, the wonderful collection of pictures at the, is it the Maza Museum, or, yeah. It's just a delight to be here. I'm a failed academic, and when I say failed is I stopped short of my PhD, and so this is the best, the next best thing, which is I get to float in, kind of like an uncle, and then as soon as the things get tough, I'm floating back out. So what I thought we would do tonight is I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my background. My topic is the liberal arts and success, and then engage in a Socratic dialogue. I'm a big believer of the power and wisdom of the Greek philosophers, and Plato in particular, with all due respect to Aristotle. And so I'm a big fan of Socratic dialogues. I've found them to be wonderful tools in the world of business and in life in general. So I'm hopeful that we'll have a dialogue more than me speechifying at you. But I'll give you a little context about me, a little more context than the wonderful introduction that you've already heard. So I'm multicultural. Holland, lived in 4 or 5 countries, and then ended up in Brussels, Belgium, where my father ran the World Assembly of Youth, which was an international development organization in the 60s. From there, he was hired to the United Nations, so we all followed suit and ended up in New York City in 1973, which is where I grew up after age 11. And so a few things that I think are relevant. I went to the UN, the United Nations International School, which is a wonderful school in Manhattan, in New York City, and one that really focused on the power and importance of the liberal arts. And so by the time I graduated in 1980, I had completed a full international baccalaureate program, and really college level courses in philosophy and mathematics and chemistry, organic chemistry. I thought I was going to be a scientist. I don't know what was wrong with me. So anyway, so I ended up in upstate New York, and after spending a couple of years, I found that by the end of my sophomore year, I had already taken 4 philosophy courses and several English literature courses, and so that became my focus as an undergraduate. And really what I loved about it was that it gave me a really broad base to explore the nature of truth and wisdom. And I really took the Sophia part of the love of wisdom, the philosophy, very seriously. And I thought, and still think, that gaining in wisdom, getting steeped in wisdom is probably the greatest enterprise of all of our lives, is growing in maturity. And that is my life's purpose, and I've made it the focus of my life these days to helping others gain similar insights and grow. So after college, with an English degree and a philosophy degree, I did what, one of the few things that I could do was to be a journalist. And so I took up journalism, and I was a correspondent for what was then known as Third World News Agency, Interpress Service. And worked in Rome, and worked in New York, and worked in a few places writing. I had a strong passion for religion, and so I was already in training. I was raised Roman Catholic, but my father was a Hindu, and I had a strong interest in Buddhism, and so I kind of pursued all of those simultaneously through my studies of philosophy and theology. I ended up at Harvard thinking I would become a professor. I did a master's there, and because I speak several languages, I paid my way through college, through grad school by translating. And that led to the next phase of my career, which was managing an institution called the Boston Language Institute in the late 80s, which was a language school and translation organization. And that then led to, after I decided that I didn't want to spend the average 11 years to get a PhD at Harvard, that I didn't have the passion to do that, my life took a detour. And I think that's part of the fluidity that a liberal arts education will give you. So I ended up at Microsoft in 1991. My wife at the time, my ex-wife now, faxed my resume in to Microsoft in 1990, and I didn't hear anything from them for nine months. So we had kind of given up. And then out of the blue, they called me, and 4 days later, I was in the state of Washington interviewing, a day's worth of interviews, grueling, 9 hours, one with I think there was a 15-minute lunch break. It was a form of hazing. And and a week later after that, they had relocated me and my entire family to Seattle, where for 12 years, I was in Bill Gates' Microsoft, and which means something very specific. Very aggressive, very ambitious, very driven company, lots of alpha personalities. Within a couple of years, they had promoted me to director, and then very quickly thereafter to senior director of international. So I was managing Microsoft's operations worldwide in taking our products to foreign markets, which meant a lot of travel. I was traveling 70% of the time, and using a lot of the skills that I learned as a philosopher in particular. My first major assignment after I moved on from running a translation team was business management. And the person who hired me picked me from a group of, there were probably 15 or 20 applicants that he was considering for this position because I had a philosophy degree. And he told me, and this is a story I'm sharing with you, that he said, I saw you had philosophy in your background, which means you can think. And what I mean by that is you can analyze and discriminate good arguments from bad ones. You know how to construct them. You know how to deconstruct them. You know how to get to the essence of an argument. This skill is incredibly valuable in any profession that you choose to apply it to. The common sense that results is actually quite uncommon in the world of business, and very valuable. The English degree that I had allowed me to articulate. I know you have a rhetoric program here in Findlay, which is actually a really wonderful thing. Rhetoric is an incredibly valuable discipline that's much neglected in most colleges and universities. And so that allowed me to be reasonably persuasive with my arguments, to be able to articulate them, to be able to write them down in a succinct form. So that was a big help. And my languages, the languages that I had learned, also meant that when they needed to pick someone to go international, that person happened to be me. And so I grew my business career out of my background in philosophy in particular, and in English, and my love and my knowledge of various languages as well. So that's one, Microsoft in the 1990s was a rough and tumble place, but it also created more wealth, more millionaires than at any time prior in at least in known history. And so I had achieved one measure of success, which is, I was in my 30s, and after 4 or 5 years, most of my peers who were also in their 30s were retiring, meaning that they wouldn't need to work again. They had enough money stored up in stock options. And for me, that wasn't enough, because success means other things as well. So my love of religion in particular, and Buddhism, really compelled me to find ways to give back. And so I created, my ex-wife and I created the Preeclampsia Foundation in 1999, the year 2000, and we're I think the recipients of the second or third grant given by Bill and Melinda Gates, who I knew and happened to have worked closely with both of them, gave us $100,000 to get that foundation started. So I kept my foot in the nonprofit world. I was the chair of that board for 4 or 5 years. We helped get it off the ground. It's actually very successful to this day. And then I went from being a corporate executive to being an entrepreneur and starting my own companies, probably 4 or 5 of them. One is still kind of running in the background right now. And very different dynamic being an entrepreneur to being a corporate executive, because there's no net, right? You fall off and you're going to come crashing down to the ground. There's no support structure like there is in a big company, where you can afford to make mistakes. Not many, but at least one mistake. And so I did that for a few years, and what kept nagging at me was, what is my purpose in life? And so 4 years ago, I decided that's it. I'm done with the business consulting, although I still do some. And I want to focus on spiritual companionship, spiritual direction. And so I started my own practice 4 years ago and had 9 or 10 clients, people who I met with on a weekly basis. And then this opportunity to run an organization of 6,600 spiritual companions worldwide. This is priests and nuns and psychologists and social workers and all sorts of people who are dedicated and focused on helping others achieve communion with God, or the universe, or however you might refer to that higher power, is what I do now. And it's basically allowed me to bring all of my skills as a business person, and my theology, philosophy background, and it's doing really well. I'm in my 3rd year. We do conferences, we do webinars, education. We have 4 different publications. I have a staff of 8 people full-time who work with me in Bellevue, Washington. And so that's another measure of success. And I want to open this up to a conversation with all of you, but what I would say is that what the liberal arts education gave me was the fluidity to keep moving in and out of different manifestations, with an ability that is much harder because education these days kind of makes you more and more narrow, right? There's a lot of specificity, and by the time you get your PhD, you can see really deep in one area, and you can easily lose the bigger picture. Liberal arts means you have a broad view, and then you can jump in and dig in as needed in lots of different areas. I get easily bored doing just one thing, so those are some of the lessons that I've learned, and why I keep emphasizing and doing this program. This is the 27th university I've done as a Woodrow Wilson visiting fellow. And I love it because the opportunity to engage with all of you is invigorating for me. And because I want to communicate to you how special it is that you have the opportunity to explore broadly. And you never know when that particular class in an area that might seem tangential to you now actually becomes very useful later. The example I gave about having a philosophy degree and happening to find a manager at Microsoft who had a similar background and who went, that's the key I was looking for, that's the key differentiator I was looking for, is just one example. So that's my story. Yes, I was also ordained as a Zen monk on Friday. That's the culmination of a 30-year journey for me, and that's part and parcel of being living into who I am and harmonizing as many different elements. I really believe in the Renaissance ideal, which is that we should do as many things as well as possible. And I'm a musician as well. I love cooking. I love being a father. I have 6 children. And there's so many other projects that I'm not sure I'm going to get to all of them in this lifetime, but the liberal arts has given me that opportunity. So that's my little spiel to all of you. And I know that there's a couple of roving microphones, I've been told. Oh, no, there's one set up here in the front. So I would love it if we could have a dialogue. And I'm going to ask the first bold soul or two to come up to the microphone, and there are no bad questions, and I don't bite. And so let's talk a little bit about what it means to be successful and what it means to be successful in the context of a liberal art education. So thank you. Emily, thank you.
Yeah. So how did you, were you ever fearful of leaving this kind of broad and then going narrow and then going back broad in your studies? Did that like cause any anxieties, or did you know like the straight and narrow wasn't exactly the way for you?
Well, you know, you're a philosophy and religion person too, so the narrow is pretty broad in philosophy, and the broad can be pretty narrow as well. And that's what I love about, it's just not getting stuck in the narrow. It's being able to kind of jump in and out. Mm-hmm. And so having a larger context, so you're kind of looking, you know, you're on a plane, so you have to keep a visual field of everything around you, and then you have to land the plane, and so you have to be very focused on the runway and the various activities you have to perform in the cockpit to land the plane. So you've got both the broad and the narrow, and I think those are, I see them as complementary. So I haven't, in my own personal circumstances, I haven't worried about going. I find that the deeper I get in anything, the more universal I get also. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Is it?
Go ahead. You're already there. Please go. You're already there.
No, you first.
For those of us who, you know, I've been in school for a little bit longer, and I've been like trying to like narrow, but then like coming here this past year or so, and it's my last year, I've kind of realized like maybe I want to like broaden out a little bit more, but I don't know like where to start broadening out. Like I'm a econ business major. And I'm kind of like, well, I have one more semester, I've got a packed schedule, but like maybe outside of school, like what else could I look at to maybe like expand my horizon a little bit and help my future out?
Well, there's so many different, you know, I tell my kids, my own kids this, is, you know, you pull on any strand and the whole universe follows, right? If you pull hard and long enough, everything is going to open up. Mm-hmm. And I would say travel is certainly a good option to consider. Becoming familiar with a foreign language, a foreign culture, kind of broadens your mind. What I meant to say, and thank you for reminding me, is that they've actually done these neurological analysis of the various points of the brain that get activated. Mm-hmm. And the more neural pathways you have open, the more of a creative thinker you are. And it's not always just by virtue of design. It's not just the way you're born. It's the pathways that you cultivate. That's why people who speak multiple languages have more pathways activated, because they use different parts of their brain. And so I think you can pull on any string, but certainly travel would be one option I would consider. And then, you know, have faith in what you're doing, have faith in who you are, and you'll bring that skill set to whatever you do. You know, whatever, even if it's a job that's temporary or just a stepping stool, working there will reveal the path to you from one to the next. And we're such a solutions-oriented culture, right? We're always looking for the answers, the solution to the formula, to the mathematical equation. And what philosophy has taught me and my studies in theology as well is that focusing on the questions is much more important than focusing on the answers, because at the end of the day, the older I get, the less I know. And that's not a bad thing, because that's how it is. There's only so many things we can know. So have faith in yourself, travel a little bit, and just pull on whatever string the universe puts in front of you hard enough, and it'll reveal itself.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So you spent many years working in the business world, whether as for-profit and non-profit, and then you took a big detour to explore a bit more your search for wisdom and the spiritual world. How and when did that happen? When did you take that decision that you wanted to stop being so focused on business?
Well, I think when I was a freshman in college, I was 17, and I knew then what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. And I kind of forgot that along the way and remembered it, kept remembering it periodically. Is this who I am? I kept asking myself, is this who I am? Is this job that I'm doing, does it have integrity with my inner essence? And I'd say that's a good bit of advice is, where if you find yourself doing a job where you're kind of rolling your eyes as soon as you roll into the job in the morning, you're in the wrong place. And even if they're paying you, loads of money, and I can tell you that from personal experience, if it's not satisfying your soul, if it's not satisfying the essence of who you are, you're in the wrong place. And that's really kind of, how do we measure success, right? I have so many colleagues at Microsoft who ended up, they don't need to work again, and they have, houses and cars, plural, and boats and travel, and they're lost. They're lost. They keep going from one seminar to the next, looking for themselves, looking for their essence, because money can't give you, it can give you lots of things, and it has its place. I'm not saying it doesn't. But you have to keep it in balance, right? There are more significant things like, matters of life and death. Where are we going after this particular lifetime? Where do we come from? All those big metaphysical questions were always important to me to answer, and so they were always in the back of my mind. And finally, I guess I had accomplished enough by society's measures of success, quote unquote, that I finally felt like I could focus on what my own personal measure of success is, and that's what I'm doing now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I know you mentioned something about participating in nonprofit organizations, and that's something I'm interested in after I get out of school. I was wondering what's the best way to get your foot in the door to start doing that, either now or when I get out of school?
Well, internships are always a great way to go because nonprofits are usually not rolling in the dough. And so most of them will welcome you if you're willing to provide some unpaid labor. And I want to encourage that because it's actually, if you go in there and you learn the ropes, first of all, you get skill sets on how is this organization run, how are they practically implementing their goals, their stated goals, and you'll either learn they're doing it beautifully, I have something to learn, or they're doing it not so great and I still have something to learn. And then if you prove yourself, they would rather hire someone they know than someone they don't know. So I would say nonprofits, internships is the way to go. There's very few that will turn you down if you're willing to start there. And so that's what I would encourage you to consider is start there and then see where it goes from there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good. The brave, the bold.
You said.
I think you might want to raise that. Yeah.
You said something about Buddhism. And
Yeah.
like, you use Buddhism as like a tool to succeed in
Yeah.
other religions, and or
Yeah.
how did you use that, and why did it make you go to Buddhism in particular?
Yeah. My thesis at divinity school when I was at Harvard was I was looking for the common substrate between religions, right? Because I was raised Roman Catholic and actually very moved. I used to go to the Basilica in Brussels every day. I was raised by Jesuits, and so we were going to Mass every day, the Latin Mass, which is a 2 to 3 hour Mass. That, you know, if you ever need a cure for insomnia, that's it. And so I was very deeply, passionately interested in that. And my thesis was comparative mysticism. So I would read the Teresa of Avila and St. Francis of Assisi and Rumi and the Buddha's writings and say, what do they have in common? And they would all talk about the great death of the soul and the importance of prayer, the importance of contemplation in particular. And so Zen, for me, that's what it is. Zen Buddhism is meditation. And you know, I've been meditating every day for 38 years. I think I've missed maybe 15 days out of almost 15,000 days in that period. And that grounds me, and it's the reason why that particular manifestation, it doesn't have to be Buddhism, right? There's a lot of rich history of contemplation in Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Hinduism and Buddhism and now and outside of the main religions as well. And but that grounding allows focus and discipline and discernment, and a different kind of discernment than intellectual discernment. It's more of a contemplative insight or an intuitive union with God or the universe, however you want to describe it. So that's why for me, in my particular case, my Buddhist practice is so important. Thanks. Yeah, someone should just raise that microphone. There's got to be a. There we go.
You like that?
Yeah, takes a trained theologian to do things like that.
Right. Critical thinker. When I was in high school, I read Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha,
Yeah,
and it changed my life.
yeah,
And helped me define journey of faith for me. And I saw a friend who I hadn't seen in many years, and I asked her. She's a family judge in Baltimore, Maryland, has been for 30-some years. And I asked her if she remembers the book, and she said, "Oh yes, I've read it over 30 times."
Oh wow. Yeah.
So I was just wondering, what are the pivotal books that you've read?
Yeah.
If you would be
Sure.
kind enough to share this.
Well, that's I was just talking about this at my ordination ceremony on Friday. I was in a preceptorial. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the term preceptorial, probably not. I was in a seminar as a freshman called Gods and Buddhas, and the book that introduced the Buddha section was called What the Buddha Taught. And it's written by a Sri Lankan monk called Walpola Rahula, and it basically detailed all of the Fourfold Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and kind of the Buddhist way. So that was a deeply influential book for me, probably the most influential, because when I read it, it's not that I discovered something, it's that I remembered. You know, I remembered myself. And I've heard many of my colleagues describe the Bible in the same way, that when they read it, they read themselves reflected back in there, God reflected back through it. And so what the Buddha taught was certainly a seminal probably the most seminal book that I've read. And I've read lots of books, and you know, I could point to different ones that, for different reasons, especially if we start a conversation in literature, which we're not going to do because then we'll be at it all night. But I'd say that book in particular was the most seminal one for me. No one's going to ask me about Bill Gates? No? No.
Taking into consideration what you mentioned about the importance of the liberal arts for your growth, not only as a career path, but in a daily basis, what would you recommend to a student that doesn't have like the luck to be studying a liberal arts major in order to dedicate like some time to that growth? Like as I said, on a daily basis, like is it some dedicated time to reading, meditation?
Yeah. Well, so yes, I combine practices. I mean, I think that's an interdisciplinary approach is what I recommend, right? Which is take elements from different disciplines, and that really is the essence of the liberal arts, I would argue, and blend them together in creative ways that work for you. And so, if what you're asking is, you know, are liberal arts a luxury that only that is only afforded to the well-to-do, then I would disagree. I would say that is a very worthwhile investment, as long as you keep in mind, you know, the practical dimensions of needing to make a living and being able to apply that creative, those insights that you're gaining. And I've given the example of philosophy, but it could be psychology or health sciences, or, you know, equestrian, your work with horses. That could be that thread of the universe that I was talking about. You can keep pulling. So these aren't mutually exclusive. You can do multiple things at once. You can, you know, meditate and take a philosophy course and take care of horses at the same time. And those will blend in creative ways and in unexpected ways, as long as they're in harmony with who you are and who you want to be. And that's the key. The test of whether what you're doing is right is, does it feel like the right thing to do for you? I mean, I'm not just talking about, you know, kind of superficial excitement, but that deeper voice that we all have within us that knows if you're on the right path or not, and it tells you so. And it's important to listen to that voice. And I think a lot of us can learn to ignore it, especially when we're trying to please our parents or our teachers or our friends, instead of trying to be true to who we are. So blend. It's like cooking a paella. You just blend, put different ingredients in there and see that something good comes out. Thanks. I will say, since I just mentioned Bill Gates, that is another good example, right? He, as I think most of you know, he dropped out of Harvard after a year and a half, so never got a formal college education. He didn't feel like he needed one. He you know, had a laser-like focus on this new discipline that was building up and how to accomplish it, and he focused on who he was at that time. And yet he's evolved into, you know, there's lots of different Bill Gateses. I remember the one, you know, the mercurial one who would throw things at the wall and yell at people, and he was kind of a rough manager, very difficult person to work with and to be around, because he was extremely demanding. And yet look at the shift that he's made in the last 20 years, really in the last 15 years, from this ruthlessly effective, brutal business person, driven, ambitious business person, to the greatest philanthropist in human history, as far as we know. And how he has taken all of those great business skills and all of that great ambition and insight and intellect that he has, and you know, I'd say Bill Gates' intellect is like a razor. It's very, very sharp. And turned it to helping others and to solving public health issues and to solving them in a very effective and disciplined way. And that's another example of, we're all multifaceted individuals, and we shouldn't let ourselves be defined narrowly to be just one thing. We're different things at different times, and we can be multiple things at any time as well. And so don't narrow yourselves, be broad. Be broad, and I don't mean broad in a superficial way. Be broad and deep. Do everything that you can as deeply and as profoundly as you can. So that's my Bill story. I'm a Zen monk, so I'm happy to sit here in silence for 25 minutes if we have to. No more questions? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we're, as I'm sure you're aware, in this country, we're in the middle of a kind of political situation, especially with the nomination for the Supreme Court, sit on the Supreme Court. And the discussions I've heard for maybe a year are really raising the question of, are we kind of past this idea of truth? I mean, is it even possible to know much in that direction? Mm-hmm. Even in terms of the specifics of a Supreme Court nominee and history and so forth. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the situation that we're in? Yeah. Generally and perhaps even specifically, the divide that's...
Well, in some ways this is, and I don't use these terms lightly, it's kind of a civil war that we're in this country now. And I do think that truth ultimately prevails. I don't see things ending well for liars because their lies always catch up to them sooner or later. And I think that's what we're starting to see with the process, the confirmation process for Judge Kavanaugh right now, is that all sorts of things are coming out of the woodwork, and I don't think it's going to end well. Even if he is confirmed, I don't think it's going to end well. I have faith, and it's actually kind of the ultimate irony that the Electoral College, that the founders of our country, who are all big fans of Plato and the Republic, and who kind of built this form of government very much around Platonic principles, in particular the Supreme Court, which is, they really are philosopher kings that Plato talked about so extensively in the Republic. That's been turned upside down. It is really, and I hope all of you students have read George Orwell in 1984, and if you haven't, you should go back to your rooms tonight and order it from Amazon or from your library if you have it, and read it, because we are really kind of living in an Orwellian age at the moment. I don't think lies can prevail. I do think they can. I think they can last for longer than we would want them to, but I think the truth will out. I have faith in that, and I'm hoping that we'll start to see manifestations of that in the next election, in a couple months, and in particular in 2020. So that's my belief. The evidence for it is, I don't think things will end well in general for the Trump administration. I'm not sure if that answer satisfies you, but it's the best one I can give you. Yes.
See, this was perfect for me down here.
Down here.
Yeah. What role has, if any, has mentoring played? Oh, it's fine. It's okay. All right. All right. All right. What role, if any, has mentoring played in your just education and work life? Professors, bosses, anything like that? How has that helped in this process?
That's a really great question. Mentoring is key. You know, you find someone who believes in you and who's willing to dedicate her or his time to you. And there's always people like that. And knowing how to find them and how to partner with them is important, because they can really kind of open the way. They can help you get places you wouldn't be able to get to otherwise. That's been very important in my own life. I've had 2 or 3 really key mentors in various areas of my life. I have one now, and you know, every boss has a boss, right? Even the most well-versed, even Caesar had someone whispering in his ear, right? Kind of by design. And so, critical, and a really excellent question. Make sure that you find, and there are people, I myself, I'm a mentor to several people, and I have to choose them really carefully because I don't have that much time. So I try to pick a select few, but they teach by, they model, they teach by example, and they're kind of like shortcuts, right? You can learn the lessons the hard way, or you can learn through their experience. And that doesn't mean you don't have to go through your own, but they can say, you know, that wall really is going to hurt when you run into it, and maybe you should consider taking a little detour. And, you know, you'll probably go like my kids, she said, but why? And I'm going to say, well, you know, you can find out for yourself, or you can listen to me. And so great question. Yes, mentors are critical. Thank you. Okay. Oh, another brave soul. Thank you.
As somebody who worked at Microsoft for a while, do you use any Apple products by any chance?
Do I use any what?
Any Apple products?
Yes, my first, you know, in the early 80s, I used the Mac Plus, which you probably don't know what that is, but it was one of the earliest platform, you know, there's this huge box with a 3.5 floppy disk, the disks that went in and out of it. And I have this battle with my daughter, my 13-year-old daughter, who wants Apple, and I keep saying Android, because it's $300 cheaper and it does the same thing. But I have nothing against Apple products other than they're much more expensive. But they're well-designed products, and they're certainly, their marketing prowess is fantastic because they have fanatical followers. So I have used them a long time ago, but I have used them. All right. Well, if there's nothing more, then thank you very much. And you know, I hope you're all thinking about what does it mean to be successful, and how can the education you're receiving here help you sort that out. And it's not a question that needs to have an immediate answer. It's important to hold the question more than the answer, but keep asking yourselves, what does it mean to be successful? What does it mean for me to be successful? And how can I use the resources at this university and my mentors and my professors and my friends to help me accomplish those objectives of learning myself and being more aware of who I am. So thank you very much.